Hey YouTube, how you guys doing? My name is Kyle, you know me as Dragonmar, and welcome to a new video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I want to talk about one of the tips that I give probably the most on my stream and in Discord and all that kind of stuff. This tip is about what I say to people when they're hard stuck. And the surprising truth is that the feedback I've gotten from people who come back to me a day later, a week later, whatever it is, oh my gosh, it actually worked. And I'm kind of there like, oh, okay. You know, I mean, I didn't put too much thought into it, but you know, I want to kind of maybe expand upon my point and talk about why it works, and why maybe it might be the right decision for you if you're stuck as well. Now, if you guys do enjoy these videos, remember, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tap that bell. I also want to say I stream pretty much every single day starting at 12 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. Hope to see you guys there. We have a lot of fun. And without any further ado, let's begin the video. Now, first things first, I want to talk about what it means to be hard stuck and just kind of give my little bit of a opinion here, if you will, on what it means, since I think some people have disagreeing opinions when it comes to this term. Now, generally when people talk about being hard stuck, they talk about just being in a rank for a long period of time. Now, the idea here is that something is happening that is keeping them in that rank, right? And hence the second part of that is the stuck, right? They're hard stuck. They can't get out of it. You know, it's not soft. You know, it's not like mud. You can't just push your way through. No, something is going on, right? Now, some people say this doesn't even exist. Like, there is no elo hell. You're not hard stuck. You know, you are the rank you are because you deserve to be there, which I think is very true to a certain degree. But I also think that sometimes certain things happen where we might be unfortunately or unknowingly kind of doing the same thing over and over and over, and it doesn't work and we don't change anything, right? You guys know the definition of insanity. You guys have obviously heard it before, where it's like, you know, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result or something like that, right? That's kind of what, when people say they're hard stuck, it reminds me of, because a lot of the times they don't actually make any changes. Like, you know, in my chat every single day, I have hundreds of people coming in and out. And a lot of times they'll lead with a question like, hey, I'm this rank and I've been stuck here for this long. What should I do? And that's kind of the question I want to answer today, right? With that little bit of knowledge or excuse me, that little bit of information, right? It's not that much info. I don't have a VOD to review. You're not telling me the agents you play, your play style, you know, what's your KD looking like, you know, what role do you generally play? Are you an IGL? Do you play in a stack? Are you solo queue? You know, without any of that information, I kind of have to just default to this sort of one answer. And that's what I want to talk about here when it comes to people who say they're hard stuck. And I think that the surprising thing to me is that the positive feedback I get about this is overwhelming. And it seems to work for a lot of people, to the point where people start giving it to me when I start sucking in my own games, which is like, all right, guys, very funny. But I do want to talk about that, so let's get into it. All right, so the piece of advice, the one tip, kind of the golden piece of advice, to be real. I was gonna say golden rule, it's not really a rule. But what I say to people who tell me they're hard stuck, how do I get out, is I tell people to change things up. I know it's not very exciting, is it? I mean, change things up, what does that even mean? Great question. I'm going to talk about that. So the idea here is that if you are stuck because you are not making changes, right? Now, changes can be both positive and negative. You could make a change and it's negative. However, the idea behind this piece of advice I give to people is that if all you tell me is you're in a rank and you're stuck, I'm going to assume that you are not trying to change up the way you play the game or how you play the game, and that is part of the reason. So what I end up asking people a lot as well is I say, okay, what agents do you play? And then they'll be like, oh, you know, I play Cypher, Killjoy, and maybe a little Omen here and there. I'm like, all right, great. Now, what's your play style like? And you know what they say to me? They'll say, oh, well, my play style, you know, I'm pretty aggressive. I like to lurk. I like to push flanks. And I'm like, oh, okay. So essentially, you're an aggressive player who plays a more passive role in game. I'm assuming that's where part of the problem comes from, where you don't have the patience needed to be playing a support role or to be playing a sentinel, especially where you're often asked to anchor sites. So what do I say? I tell them to change things up. I tell them, hey, why don't you try a duelist? You know, Why don't you try playing Omen more aggressive in that situation? Obviously, Omen is a great choice, by the way. Omen mains unite. But why don't you try playing a duelist or something like a Phoenix or a Reyna or a Raze, you know? And what ends up happening is they come back and they say, hey, like I'm ranking up now. Thank you so much. And I don't even know if a lot of times people understand why it's working, but essentially what happens is we all have a play style. For me, I have a mix between an aggressive and a passive playstyle. I like having the capability to push in and get aggressive, but I also like playing a more of a support role with my smokes. That's why Omen's a great fit for me. However, if I am a more defensive player, it doesn't make sense for me to take a duelist or to play a duelist, right? Because I am not a player who thrives on entry frags and on getting opening kills and on getting aggressive, right? I like playing passive. I like letting people enter sites. Obviously, I'm talking like in the mind of a very passive player, like a Sentinel player. So those players should be playing Sentinels, right? Because it matches their playstyle. The problem a lot of people have is they get into this mindset of, oh, what's the best solo queue carry agent? Then they'll pick like a Phoenix or something and they'll like bottom frag. They'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm losing. You know, I'm playing Phoenix, I'm stuck. What do I do? And I'm just like, you know, you got to think about your play style. What is your play style? And does it fit the agent you're playing? And this is why that piece of advice to change things up is such a interestingly simple but effective solution to a lot of the problems that people have. Because when you are stuck, you often are not changing things. So when I tell people to change, it forces them out of that sort of the confines of the box they've put themselves in, maybe the Sentinel box or the Duelist box, and says, okay, switch it completely. Go from a Duelist to a Sentinel or from a Sentinel to a Duelist, and then see if that matches your playstyle. And a lot of the times it does. A lot of people will just look at these tier lists and be like, okay, this is the best agent, I'm playing them. And they're like the most aggressive player in the world playing a Killjoy. And I'm like, what on earth? You're gonna entry frag with Killjoy? And they do, and then they die. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, you don't have flashes, or you know, you don't have X, Y, and Z. And I think that this is just one of those pieces of advice that everybody needs to hear. And it just kind of got to the point where I was like, I have to make a video on this. So the piece of advice here, if we are not following along still, is that if you feel that you are stuck in your given rank, you have to start changing things up. You have to change the agent you're playing or the play style. And that's something I want to talk about now. All right, so first and foremost, I want to talk about changing your agents, and I want to help people with some agent selection here, because I think that's a really important piece of making a change, and then the other piece is the playstyle change, which I'll talk about next. So when it comes to agents in this game, right, we have a bunch of different sort of classes. We've got our duelists, our initiators, we've got the sentinels, and so on. However, a lot of people will end up just playing what they think is the best agent, and that's not really the way you want to play. You want to match your agents to your play style, and in particular to how you play certain maps. So what I'm talking about here is aggressive players should try to steer away from playing agents like Cypher and from playing agents like Sage and Killjoy, and honestly even things like Brimstone and Viper, just because those agents do not lend themselves well to an aggressive style of play. There is no flashing through stuff and charging in movement abilities. That stuff does not exist with these agents for a reason. That is because their kits are designed to be more defensive and to be more supportive for your team. So it's really important that in your games, you guys are constantly thinking and figuring out what your playstyle is. How do you like to play this game? And then match that to the agents you've played. I know I've already talked about why I pick Omen, but if I was a more aggressive player, if I liked going for first bloods more often, and I liked being the entry fragger rather than like second one in, I would be much better off playing a duelist. That way I can flash myself in. And it's just really important to get this piece of the puzzle nailed, because once you figure out what agent you're good at, once you figure out what agent fits your playstyle, you can start perfecting them. And then that's where that grind and that sort of climb through the ranks really begins. When you match the agent to your playstyle, that's where you truly can figure out what your true rank is and get up there. All right, and now I want to talk about playstyle. So playstyle is something that I think a lot of people they don't really know their play style, which is kind of strange. And I think a lot of it comes from just like uncoordination with the team, just not really being in sync with people. So you're kind of doing a little bit of everything. You're covering flanks, you're lurking, you're entry frag one round, then next round you're the last one in. It's just kind of one of those funny things where, especially in the lower ranks, it's sometimes is hard to find your role. So I think I'll give you guys a little bit of slack there, but I still want to talk about this because playstyle is extremely important in understanding what might be holding you back. So, like I've been talking about with finding the agent that fits your playstyle, you need to make sure that the playstyle that you're playing in actually fits the way you play the game. So, in a lot of cases, what will happen is we're often forced into roles that are not things that maybe we wanted to do going into the game. Now, there have been games where I've had to play a sentinel, which means I play passive. Thankfully, since I already played a more support role on Omen, that kind of works for me. However, when it comes to your playstyle, it's really about identifying a few things. One of those things is, am I somebody who likes to go for the first kill of the game? Do I find myself pushing forward, pushing up mid, getting info, getting kills first? Is that something I like to do? Figure that out first. That's the first sort of question you want to answer. Next, how often am I dying first? Another very important piece of the puzzle is to figure out how often you're the first player dead. That is going to tell us a lot about how you play. Are you an aggressive player or are you more passive? Next, how do you defend against things like rushes? Are you somebody who wants to peek into a 5-man rush, maybe with a flash, or are you someone who wants to hold back, hold an angle? Once again, trying to figure out, are we aggressive or are we passive? On something like a post plant, when you're in a 1v1, do you wait for the bomb to be tapped, or are you peeking well before the player taps the bomb to try to kill them? Once again, trying to figure out aggressive or passive. You see what I'm saying? These are the type of questions you want to be asking yourself to figure out, okay, am I an aggressive player? Am I a passive player? Am I some sort of in between? Obviously, I think we all fall in between to some degree. It's really, really important you identify this because this is going to help you a lot to figure out how you should be playing your matches and if something should change. Now, remember, all of this entire video is about making changes. So the big takeaway here is that once you answer these questions, you'll know, okay, am I playing an agent that fits my play style? My aggressive playstyle, my passive playstyle? If not, that's when you want to make the change. All right, so I've talked about playstyle, I've talked about agents, I've talked about what the tip is. I want to kind of sum this all up into why this actually works and why it's almost a little surprising to me in that degree. Now, this works, changing things works because, like I said, you sort of get into a routine or a rut, if you will, where you're just doing the same thing over and over, constantly losing by playing the same agent in the same way every single game, and it just does not work. What changing things does is it forces you to adapt to a new agent and potentially a new play style. And because of this, it gives you the opportunity to see things sort of through a different lens and to maybe explore a different side of your gameplay that otherwise is almost impossible. It is almost impossible to play a Cypher like you would a Phoenix, simply because he doesn't have a flash. Of course, you can use his camera and his cages to push forward, but because he doesn't have flashes, it really takes away from his ability to truly be that entry role. Now, if you are forced to play Phoenix, if you actually make the change, what ends up happening is you start seeing, okay, well, if I was Cypher in this position, what would I do? Now I'm a Phoenix. I have these new tools. How can I use them? And it starts working. The big takeaway here for me is that a lot of players have not actually identified how they truly play the game and how they excel at the game, so they don't know the potential they're missing out on. They don't know that they're not actually giving the game 100%. Maybe they're stuck at 80 because they're on the wrong agent, or maybe they're stuck at 50% because they're on they're playing they're trying to force themselves to play a play style that doesn't work for them. So when you change things, you force yourself into this different, maybe even more difficult position where you're learning and you're trying to get better, but you force yourself into it and you realize this is actually what I'm good at, right? And I think that's sort of what happened with me with Omen, is that with Brim, it was too passive for me. It was too slow. But with Omen, I can make fast plays, I can make flashy plays, or I can play very passive, and that's exactly where I like to be. And I think that what happens and why so many people come back and they say, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this worked, Kyle, thank you so much. You know, I promoted from iron to gold in the past week. And I'm like, great. And in a lot of the times, it's just simply because they locked themselves into this little box and they weren't letting themselves get out. Because they would constantly pick the same thing over and over. Remember, guys, don't ram your head into a wall over and over. If you have to change things, or if things aren't working, look to make a change and see if it works. And remember, it's not always going to work, but if it does, congratulations. And a lot of the times it will, because a lot of the times people are forcing themselves to play something that does not fit how they truly play the game. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you live on stream, and hope you guys have a great day. Take it easy, and peace.